The soft glow of dawn spread across the village of Ikena, casting long shadows over the thatched roofs. Zuri sat at the edge of the riverbank, dipping her toes in the cool water, lost in thought. Today was supposed to be the beginning of her new life. With a letter from the city university tucked away in her bag, she was only hours away from leaving the village behind. Zuri, a familiar voice called from behind. It was a J.O., breathless from running. His wide smile was contagious. I heard the news. You got in. She smiled warmly at him, her eyes sparkling with hope. I did, a J.O. I'm going to be a doctor. Can you believe it? You'll be the best doctor, he said, with pride in his voice. But his expression darkened. Have you told Oba? Zuri's smile vanished. Oba, the village chief's son, had taken a disturbing interest in her for months. His advances were persistent, and his influence made it difficult to reject him openly. I'll leave quietly, she whispered. There's nothing he can do if I'm already gone. As Zuri and Ajeo shared a moment of quiet anticipation, the sound of heavy footsteps on dry earth broke the peace. Oba appeared, flanked by two of his friends, their presence commanding and unwelcome. His eyes flashes as he approached, his fine robes swaying with each step. Well, Zuri, here you are, Oba spoke slowly, his smile full of excessive pride. Planning your escape, without saying goodbye? Zuri became suddenly tense. I'm not escaping. I'm leaving for the city to study. You know this. Oba smiled quietly, a sound that annoyed her to her nerves. Study? Why waste your time when you can have everything right here? Marry me, Zuri. Be my wife. You'll not desire for nothing again. I've told you before, Oba. I'm not interested, she said firmly, meeting his gaze without fear. Oba suddenly grew annoyed. His friends exchanged uneasy glances, but said nothing. You think you're better than us? Just because you can read a few books? You belong here, Zuri. With me. Ajeo stepped forward, placing himself between Zuri and Oba. She said no, Oba. Leave her alone. Oba, now angry. Stay out of this, Ajeo. Or, do you want troubles? I'm not afraid of you, Ajeo replied. For a tense moment, the air seemed to crackle with unspoken threats. Then, Oba smiled irritatingly and turned back. You'll come around, Zuri. They always do. He turned and walked away, his friends following like shadows. Zuri's breath heavy, her hands trembling. He won't stop, she whispered. We'll find a way, Ajeo assured her. Go pack. I'll help you leave tonight. That night, under the cover of darkness, Zuri made her way to the village outskirts, where a cart waited to take her to the city. Ajeo stood watch, his eyes scanning the path for any sign of trouble. But trouble found them. Before Zuri could climb into the cart, Oba and his men appeared, blocking the road. You really thought you could leave without my permission? Oba sneered. Zuri's heart pounded. You have no right to stop me. Oba looked suddenly angry. I have every right. You're mine now. He nodded to his men, and they grabbed Zuri despite her struggles. Ajeo fought to defend her, but was quickly overpowered. Oba leaned forward, his voice a sinister whisper. You'll regret defying me? Days later, Zuri sat in her mother's hut, her spirit broken. The scholarship was gone, her dreams crushed under the weight of Oba's cruelty. NUGA, her mother, held her close, whispering words of comfort. You are not defeated, my child, NUGA said firmly. He thinks he has broken you, but he is wrong. We will find justice. Zuri looked up, her eyes filled with determination. No one will believe me, Mama. He's too powerful. Then we will make them believe, NUGA replied. You are stronger than you know. Zuri knew she couldn't rely on the elders or the village's broken justice system. She needed to confront Oba herself. She waited for the right moment, when he would be alone and vulnerable. Evening, she found him in the forest, away from prying eyes. He was drunk, laughing to himself, unaware of her presence. The forest was strangely quiet, save for the rustle of leaves underfoot and the distant call of night creatures. The moon was low, casting pale beams of light. Zuri's heart pounded in her chest, but her grip on the blade remained steady. This moment is long expected. She was fearless. "Oba," she called softly. Oba looked, his eyes unfocused from the alcohol. His swagger dropped as he saw Zuri standing before him, a knife shining in her hand. He smiled, though there was an unease beneath his bravado. "Zuri," he called, loosing balance slightly. "What a surprise. Finally come to your senses? Ready to be my wife?" Zuri did not move, her expression cold. "I came to end this, Oba, once and for all." Oba's silly expression faded. "And what? You think you can scare me with that little toy?" He took a step forward, towering over her. "Put it down. You are a woman. You are meant to obey." Zuri squeezed her jaw tightly. "No, Oba. I'm done obeying. Done being afraid." She advanced slowly, each step deliberate. Oba backed away instinctively, his bravado cracking. "You think you're brave, huh?" Raising his voice. "You're nothing. No one will believe you. No one will care. I own this village." Zuri stopped, just a breath away from him. Her voice was steady, carrying the weight of all her pain and anger. "You don't own me, Oba. And you never will." Before Oba could react, Zuri moved. She struck with precision and purpose, the blade sliding through his flesh. He screamed aloud as he crumpled to the ground. Blood gushed from the wound, soaking his body. He was twisting and turning violently backwards and forwards due to pain, his hands holding the remainder of his manhood. You have killed me," he gasped. He was greatly terrified. Zuri knelt beside him, her face inches from his. "No, Oba, I've saved myself. And I've saved every other woman you thought you could own." Though Oba could not breathe properly, he begged for help. Zuri stood, towering over him this time. "Help yourself, Oba, if you can." Zuri turned and walked away, still holding the knife firmly, her step slow and steady. Oba's cries faded into the darkness. Zuri didn't stop until she reached the riverbank, where she washed the blade clean. Each step she took was deliberate, feeling the night breeze and the cool earth beneath her feet. The blade, now clean but still shining in the moonlight, holding it loosely in her hand. The echoes of Oba's screams still lingered in her ears, mixing with the sounds of the forest. Zuri's breath came in steady bursts, but her mind was a whirlwind. She felt no triumph, no satisfaction. The rage that had fueled her earlier had subsided, leaving behind a quiet resolve. As she approached the village, moving closer to her house, the huts, now showing a pale glow of dawn, stood silent. A rooster crowed in the distance, signaling the start of a new day. It felt like any other morning, yet everything had changed. Zuri paused by the riverbank, kneeling to rinse the blade once more. The cold water stung her fingers, but she welcomed the sensation. It was a reminder that she was still alive, still in control. She watched as the ripples spread across the surface of the river. Her reflection stared back at her, unflinching. The woman in the water was different now, stronger, fiercer, and fearless. The realization warmed her chest, sparking a newfound sense of purpose. As she rose, the first rays of sunlight broke over the horizon, casting a golden hue across the village. It was as if the world itself acknowledged her transformation. Zuri took a deep breath, inhaling the crisp, clean air. There was no going back. By the time she reached her mother's hut, NUGA was already awake, sitting outside with a bowl of water. Her eyes, wise and knowing, met Zuri's, and for a moment, neither spoke. NUGA broke the silence first. "It's done, isn't it?" Zuri nodded, her voice steady. "It's done." NUGA rose, placing a hand on her daughter's shoulder. "Come inside. You need to rest. We have much to prepare for." Inside the hut, the familiar sense of herbs and spices wrapped around Zuri like a comforting blanket. She sank onto a woven mat, her body finally giving in to exhaustion. NUGA busied herself, lighting a small fire and preparing tea to calm her down. As Zuri sipped from the clay cup, she allowed herself a moment of peace. Her mother's presence was a soothing balm for her soul. "You did what needed to be done. NUGA said softly, her eyes reflecting pride and sorrow. But the path ahead will not be easy. Zuri met her gaze, full of determination. I'm ready, Mama. Whatever comes next, I'll face it. Outside, the village was beginning to come up. The quiet hum of life resumed, unaware of the storm that had just passed. But Zuri knew that soon, everything would change. The truth would come to light, and she would have to stand before the elders and the entire village. As she drifted into a restless sleep, Zuri's last thought was not of fear, but of hope. For the first time in her life, she felt free, and that freedom, hard-won and precious, was worth any price. Morning in Ikena was usually marked by a gentle rhythm, roosters crowing, women sweeping the earthen floors, and children running barefoot through the village. But today, an uneasy tension settled over the air, thick and suffocating. Whispers traveled from hut to hut like restless spirits, each one carrying a piece of the night's events. Oba's men had found him at dawn, barely conscious and drenched in blood. They carried him to the healer's hut, their faces pale with fear and disbelief. The news spread quickly. Oba, the son of the village chief, had been attacked, and the culprit was none other than Zuri. At first, disbelief reigned. Zuri? The quiet, hard-working girl who never raised her voice. But as the details unfolded, shock gave way to a suppressed feeling of admiration. She did what no one else dared to do. One woman murmured as she pounded yam in a mortar. Another nodded, her eyes flickering with a mix of fear and respect. Maybe it's time someone stood up to him. He's been untouchable for too long. But not everyone was supportive. Among the elders, voices of outrage rose. This is an affront to our traditions. Elder Okeke, a staunch traditionalist, barked. A woman taking matters into her own hands? It's unheard of. Elder Ifeoma, a woman known for her fairness, folded her arms across her chest. And yet, she acted where laws failed. Perhaps we should listen before we judge. The baobab tree stood at the heart of the village, its massive trunk a symbol of strength and endurance. Under its shade, the elders gathered on carved wooden stools, their expressions grim. The villagers formed a wide circle around them, murmuring anxiously. Zuri arrived, flanked by Neka and Ajeo. She walked with quiet confidence, her head held high. The murmurs stopped as she stepped into the center of the gathering. Chief Oloran, Oba's father, sat at the head of the council. His face was a mask of restrained fury, but his words were carefully chosen. Zuri, you stand accused of grievously wounding my son. Do you deny it? I do not deny it, Zuri said, her voice steady. But I ask this council to hear my truth before passing judgment. A murmur rippled through the crowd, but Elder Ifeoma raised a hand, silencing them. Speak, child. Zuri took a deep breath, drawing strength from the presence of her mother and Ajeo. For years, Oba has used his power to harm and oppress. I was one of his victims. When he cornered me in the forest last night, I knew he would not stop until he had taken everything from me. I acted to defend myself, nothing more. Chief Oloran's eyes blazed. You could have come to us. There are laws. And where were those laws when Oba hurt others? Zuri interrupted, her voice rising. How many times have we turned a blind eye because of his status? How many women suffered in silence because they knew no one would believe them? The crowd moved in a concerned way. The truth in her words was undeniable. Neka stepped forward. My daughter did what the village failed to do. If she is to be punished, let it be known that the true crime lies in our failure to protect her. Ajeo spoke next, his voice calm but firm. Zuri's actions were not out of malice, but necessity. If this council cannot see that, then we have lost our way. The elders exchanged glances, their expressions a mix of guilt and contemplation. Elder Ifeoma stood, addressing the crowd. This is not just about Zuri or Oba. This is about justice and the kind of village we want to be. We must decide whether we will uphold tradition at the cost of fairness or embrace change for the good of all. Chief Oloran's jaw clenched, but he nodded reluctantly. Let us deliberate. After what felt like hours, the elders returned. Elder Ifeoma spoke on their behalf. Zuri, you will not be punished. Your actions were justified. But let this serve as a warning to all. No one, regardless of status, is above the law. And no one, regardless of gender, is without a voice. A collective sigh of relief swept through the crowd. NUGA hugged Zuri tightly, tears streaming down her face. Ajayo grinned, his eyes shining with pride. As the villagers dispersed, many approached Zuri, offering words of gratitude and support. The tide had turned, and a new chapter had begun for Ikenna. Zuri knew the road ahead would still be difficult, but for the first time in her life, she felt hope. She had not only reclaimed her future, but also started a spark of change in her village, a spark that would burn bright for generations to come. Days turned into weeks, and the village of Ikenna slowly settled into its new reality. The incident that had once divided the community now became a catalyst for change. Zuri's actions were a constant reminder that silence was no longer an option, and talks of reform began to ripple through the village. Zuri, however, did not relax, taking pleasure in her newfound respect. She returned to her simple life, but something had shifted within her. The dreams she had once buried were now rising to the surface, demanding attention. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Zuri and Ajayo sat by the river, dipping their feet into the cool water. "You've changed everything," Ajayo said, breaking the comfortable silence. Zuri smiled faintly. "I didn't mean to. I just wanted to survive." "But you did more than that," Ajayo insisted. "You gave people hope. They're looking up to you now." Zuri sighed, looking at the ripples in the water. "I'm not a leader, Ajayo. I'm just me. And that's enough," he said softly. "But what do you want now?" Zuri didn't hesitate. "I want to study, to learn, to become a healer or a midwife. Maybe even a doctor if the world allows it." Ajayo's eyes lit up. "Then let's make it happen." Word of Zuri's ambitions spread quickly. NUGA, ever supportive, approached the village elders with a bold proposal, allowing Zuri to study under the village healer, Mama Chitty. Though initially met with skepticism, Elder Ifeoma championed the idea, emphasizing the need for more skilled healers in Ikenna. Mama Chitty, a stern but kind-hearted woman in her 60s, took Zuri under her wing. The days were long and demanding, filled with lessons on herbs, roots, and the human body's intricacies. But Zuri thrived, absorbing every detail with a hunger that impressed even Mama Chitty. "You have a gift, child," Mama Chitty told her one evening as they sorted herbs. "But more than that, you have courage. That's what makes a true healer." As Zuri's knowledge grew, so did her influence. Women, who once feared speaking out, now sought her counsel. Men, who had dismissed her, began to respect her insights. Even Chief Olorin, humbled by the events, acknowledged her value to the village. But Zuri's heart remained with those who had suffered in silence. She organized gatherings for women to share their stories and learn about their rights. With Ajayo's help, they started a small school, teaching both boys and girls to read and write, a radical idea that quickly gained support. One day, a messenger arrived from the neighboring town. A traveling physician, Dr. Adebayo, had heard of Zuri's story and sought to meet her. He was impressed by her knowledge and offered her an apprenticeship in the town's clinic. It was a difficult decision, but with NECA's blessing and Ajayo's unwavering support, Zuri accepted. The village gathered to send her forth, their pride evident in their smiles and tears. "You'll always have a home here," NECA whispered as she embraced her daughter. "And I'll come back," Zuri promised. Years later, Zuri did return, not just as a healer, but as a doctor. She brought back not only her skills, but also the spirit of change. The village clinic flourished under her care, and the small school grew into a respected learning center. Opa's story became a story that serves as a warning, but Zuri's story became a beacon of hope. Her legacy was not one of violence, but of transformation, a reminder that courage and compassion could reshape even the most rigid traditions. As she stood once more by the river, now surrounded by children and students eager to learn, Zuri felt a deep sense of fulfillment. She had reclaimed her future and, in doing so, had gifted her village a future of its own. Please like and subscribe to our channel. Hit the notification bell to be updated whenever a new captivating story is uploaded.